during your fellowships, and how do we carve our paths from there on. So I think Dr. Manpreet is on his way. Can I ask Dr. Shivani Dikshit if she can you start? Yeah, please. Uh, Dr. Shivani, if you can. I hope all of you have uploaded your presentations. We can save some time. So the talks are 8 minutes start, and we are late by almost 8 to 9 minutes. So we'll try to cover it up, and we'll take the discussions at the last. If anyone wants to ask a question, we can take in between, or mostly we'll take it up later. So yeah, we have Dr. Shivani here. She's uh, with the SRJ Nethralaya Indore, and her topic is transition from a fellow to a consultant, a rocky terrain. Over to you, Dr.
So, very
Shivani.
good afternoon. I would like to thank UC for making me a part of this wonderful session. I'll be sharing my journey and transition from a fellow to a consultant. And I hope by sharing the challenges that I faced and the learnings I had, I'll be able to help a few of our young ophthalmologists here. I completed my MS in ophthalmology from SMS Medical College, Jaipur. So after completing my MS, I had a few basic questions in my mind: that was I a good clinician back then? Was I ready to practice in a private setup or in a good city? And very importantly, was I an independent surgeon? So here is where the role of fellowship comes into play. By getting training in the subspecialty of your choice, you definitely become a better clinician. You learn how to manage different types of cases of your specialty. You gain confidence to handle OPD independently and get ready to practice in a private setup if you wish. So I did my long-term fellowship in glaucoma from Narayana Nethralaya, Bangalore. I had the privilege to get trained by one of the best, Dr. Sati Devi. Yes, I had this feeling of elation that, okay, post-graduation done, fellowship done. Again, back to those same questions. I was confident that I could handle independent OPD, manage glaucoma medically, perform all the laser procedures. But was I a confident surgeon? As I started seeking job opportunities, the reality hit me that it was just the beginning. I got the opportunity to join as a consultant at Regional Institute of Ophthalmology, Sitapur. I treated high volumes of glaucoma and cataract there, and more importantly, I made some friends for life. So when we face this transition from a fellow to a consultant, there are certain challenges that we face as to psychologically that how will we do everything on our own. We already have the clinical skills, but we have to learn to implement them and refine them further. And of course, being able to operate confidently, independently. We have this safety net above us of our mentors and seniors who are there to guide us in difficult cases in OPDs, who are scrubbed besides us when we operate. This all is taken away when we complete our fellowship. But friends, confidence is the key here. You know your subject. By the time you complete your fellowship, you have given certain years to ophthalmology already. So hold on to your confidence, and as we know that learning never stops, you'll have to go back to literature and books till the time you practice. This is probably one of the most important slides of my talk. The harsh reality being when we work in a high volume setup or in a medical college, we are actually keen on completing our OPD on time. but incorporating few things in your practice really makes your patient happy when they walk out of your chamber, like greeting them when they walk into their chamber, patiently listening to the history, taking a good history, just discussing about the diagnosis that you are making, what all investigations, why are you advising them, and the management options that you are offering. Take out a couple of minutes to answer their queries if you are offering any surgical intervention as well. You can see how scribbled my sheet is. So yes, good documentation is very important, whether you are a PG or a fellow or a consultant. Mention your clinical findings, the treatment that you have offered. Human mistakes are always possible, so please just check that the correct medication is mentioned in the correct eye, that you have mentioned about the prognosis of the disease. As I practice glaucoma, and with any other super specialty, this holds very true. That you have explained the risks and benefits involved with the surgical intervention if you have advised any. Keep attending conferences, keep yourselves updated, keep meeting your colleagues and seniors. Dr. Rituja will be speaking about it next. And we will always come across tricky cases, new cases, unusual cases in our OPD. We'll have to take them for surgery as well. So get back to your mentors, do your homework, see the literature, see the videos, and you will enter your OT very confidently, like I gave my best when I did my first Ahmed glaucoma valve implantation. As a young surgeon, as an independent surgeon, we are so much focused on the surgery itself that we tend to overlook a very few basic things. Please take out time, counsel the patient about the surgery you are going to do yourself. Prior to getting scrubbed, please check whether the consent has been signed by the patient and the attendant at the required spaces. Perform timeout prior to the surgery. Learning never stops, and you learn best from your mistakes. So if you have a chance to, access to video recording in your OT, record your surgical videos, go back home, look at your videos. They'll really make you learn as to where you went wrong and how you can improve your skills. That's what I did in Sitapur every single day after my OT. When you are about to operate on difficult cases, discuss them with your colleagues, with your mentors. They will always guide you. And I had Dr. Karan besides me in the OT. One more way to learn is to teach. So when I was in Sitapur, I trained a few fellows in glaucoma, and every time I taught them, I learned something new. So if you are in an institution, you have trainees with you, take out time, participate in their teaching schedule, and you will definitely improvise. So the expert at anything was once a beginner. So start off with your journey, and all the best. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Shivani. So we'll move on to
I think we still have a minute, so if anyone has any questions regarding how to, I think the main focus here is once you're done with your fellowship and transitioning to a consultant is a big leap actually. And she has nicely pointed out as to, where you have to you have to understand where you fit in and where you want to work after this, whether you're working in 1 tier or 2 tier or 3 tier place, and what is the demand of the patient and how polished you are actually going in as a consultant. So actually, sometimes you can go in training in a place where you can have more hands-on, and there is less burden when it compares to when you're doing it as a solo practitioner. So that is one thing which she has talked about. And the second thing which she actually emphasizes, counseling your patients. So counseling something becomes very important, because a lot of the times, as she said, that we are only focused on the surgery, that this is a surgery, we want to take it up. But we actually are not able to titrate what the patient is about, and sometimes there is a big difference of communication. So even if you give your best to those sort of patients, their ideas and when you see them post-op, they're doing very good, but still they have issues. So that is one thing which has been actually very nicely highlighted. So if anyone has any other questions.
I'll just add a point. So you're learning continuously every day. We both, so Shivani and I, we were right next to each other in the OR. And so we used to teach each other something new every day. So I would discuss something with her. How do we go about this glaucoma case? Like the first endothelial keratoplasty in the history of Sitapur that I did was when it was a case of single-eyed patient post-AGV. So Shivani was there right next to me. Okay, now how much should I trim the tube? How much should I go about it? because it was very different than a normal DSEC that you're doing. So you learn from each other a lot, and you learn from your fellows as well. I think we can move on to the next talk now by Dr. Rituja Thomas, who will be speaking on balancing conferences or meetings during your fellowship.
Thank you, Dr. Karan, and thank you to Yossi for having me in this session. So, more than balancing conferences, it's also about how to get these kind of opportunities during fellowships. And the most common opportunities that you're faced with are your local, national, and international conferences, subspecialty meetings which keep happening, CMEs. Other than that, webinars which are still going on, courses and targeted training with respect to your subspecialty, exchange programs, that is students being sent abroad, as well as certain fun sessions like OPL. Now, in your capacity as a fellow, you mainly will be doing free paper presentations. So it's important to go ahead and send all the work that you're working on to all these conferences. You can participate in instruction courses as you're invited and send physical posters as well. These hold good value. You can also send cases as e-posters and be invited as session moderators, or even take part in Yossi, which gives a platform to young ophthalmologists. So it's important to pick and choose which meetings will help with your learning, because there will be very select few meetings that you will be allowed to attend. This is mainly to see what others are doing. So what you're learning during your fellowship and what others are teaching, there may be some new things which you may pick up. Any newer techniques which you see, which you may want to implement further in your practice, and any future prospects that are there for your subspecialty as well. The networking is one of the most important things. So plan ahead which conferences you will go to, and also talk to people who are important with respect to your subspecialty. So your further fellowships, subspecialty observerships, you can meet future mentors, and you may even pick up certain job opportunities and hands-on training. Now, don't get in trouble when you're trying to go to conferences. So find out exactly how many conference leaves you're entitled to, which conferences your boss is okay with you attending. Work diligently while you're in the clinic to avoid being passed up for any kind of opportunity like a conference. And always keep backup fellows or staff and return the favor when they go for their conferences. So academic opportunities are the number one thing that you should look out for, like for example, a cadaver dissection course. If you're lucky enough, you may even get your instruction course accepted in your local conference or your state conference, and this will give you a big boost when you sort of go ahead and present even as a consultant. And if you're interested in research, you may get other opportunities. Like, for example, we worked with IISc to come up with how aerosols spread with respect to oculoplastic surgery. And this was in the COVID time, but this was something interesting that we did. And most importantly, and the biggest incentive for your mentor to help you is that you write it up. So no matter how happy you get or sad you get filling an Excel sheet, it always helps to go ahead and also publish once you've presented. Now, with respect to student exchange, in oculoplastics at least, there are programs, especially fellowships in India like that of Dr. Honavers, where they do send their students abroad for oncology training. And you can even learn from people who come from abroad for training. So they do a lot of things differently. They have different opportunities. So there's a lot that you get to learn. And how does this help you? The more you network, the more you will be invited to speak. The more you're present on social media as well, the more people will get to know what you're doing. And it's important to create awareness about what you do, because not everybody may be doing your area of work. And most importantly, during fellowship, keep your boss happy. And even more importantly, keep your co-fellow happy. And that's the secret to acing your fellowship. Although I wouldn't say I aced it, but I did have a good time. So, thank you.
Excellent talk, Rituja, as always. So, see, I'll just say one point to add to this, that like we used to say in surgery when we were residents, that the more you work, the more opportunities you're going to get. So, सबको क्या चाहिए? सर्जरीज चाहिए. आप जितना ओपीडी में काम करोगे, आपको उतनी ज़्यादा सर्जरीज के ऑप्शंस आप पे कंसल्टेंट्स देंगे. So same thing goes with conferences also. So if you're networking, if you're seen everywhere, if you're presenting, then the other person sees you and remembers you. if you just call out one out of the blue, if out of the blue, if it comes up, you may be forgotten. But if you are there, you will be remembered and given opportunities. So in the panel, we have also one fellow with us, Dr. Himani. So what is your opinion? Like, what do you do? What is your opinion on this topic, and how have you balanced your fellowship with your training?
I'm currently a fellow under Dr. Parthu Bishar sir in refractive surgery. So as you all know, sir is very enthusiastic about conferences. So he makes sure I attend all the conferences whenever possible, and he gives me extra leaves for attending those conferences. So that has never been an issue for me. So like how to balance work and conferences.
So anybody from Arvind?
So in Shankara Eye Hospital, what we have is there are slabs depending on whether you're a consultant or a fellow or whatever. And based on that, you do get complete sponsorship for travel, for everything. There's also sponsorship for publications and everything. So all the entire spectrum of research as well as conferences is managed. Another thing I wanted to add was like what she was saying, that your mentors may also be going around in conferences around. It helps in tagging around with them in their conferences. And it also helps if you help them in preparing that presentation. You end up learning a lot.
Just to finalize it, one thing is like instead of going from directly to an international or a national conference, start with your state conferences and start early. So you have your 3 years of your residency. Those are the times where you have to put in efforts, where you can ask your mentors that I want to present something for the upcoming state conference. And that is from there you start building up your confidence. And once you are in that rhythm, then you start focusing on national conferences. And you have to find your mentors well. You know, this is what that selection comes in. You have a set of people, some are more surgically sound, some are more, you know, academically sound. And that is where it helps you once you finish your fellowship, your presidency. Because once you finish your residency, when you're actually going, and I think Dr. Manpreet is here, so she will definitely talk about how presentations at national levels do help in your cracking your fellowship programs. So start early, and that would actually take you a long way. Thanks.
So next speaker is Dr. Manpreet Kaur. She'll be speaking on how and why to choose a fellowship or a senior residency after MS by DNB.
So good afternoon, everyone. Thank you to Yossi for the platform, and it's a very interesting topic, how and why to pursue a senior residency or fellowship. So I'll just tell you the life of a fellow or a senior resident and how to make the most of it. There are no financial disclosures. So why pursue a fellowship or senior residency? Why not just go directly into practice after your post-graduation? So at the end of your post-graduation, you're a jack of all trades and master of none. So the aim is to become master of one. So specialize is the answer. That is why you have to pursue a senior residency or fellowship, so that you specialize and then diversify into not only just patient care, research, teaching and training the next generation as well. So follow one course until successful and choose your specialty, which is based on your aptitude, your liking. And also all of us have different skill sets. Some are very good surgeons. Some may be more good at medicinal diagnosis. Some may like plasty, some may not like the blood, as I didn't. So choose your fellowship or senior residency based on that. Learn empathy. So as long as you're junior residents, it's more of a cross-sectional thing going on. You see the patient once, you do whatever you have to, and it's done. You don't have long-term follow-ups typically. Complication management and patient counseling is a prerogative of your seniors. In a fellowship or senior residency, you learn to own your patients, to counsel them and not shunt them. You own your successes, you own your complications as well. So it prepares you for the long run. publish your thesis. So I published my thesis on neuro-ophthalmology during my senior residency, and though it's not my specialty of choice, it's one of my highest cited papers, which won best free paper. It led to my first international conference and was also quoted in Medscape News. So it's important. This is the time when you're starting to learn the skill of medical writing, so make the most of it. Learn the art of medical writing. Good research with sound methodology. Again, when you're PGs, you may be a part of publications, not that often, but you are just a small part. Maybe you helped in data collection, someone put your name in a case report, or maybe you helped write some part of it. But designing a study, right from the drafting the proposal to data collection, analysis, paper writing, and then presenting that research as well. That is what you do in a senior residency or fellowship. Reviews, systematic reviews, meta-analysis, you learn the keys to them, and also make it a point to learn the basic concepts of statistics. Because as academicians, whenever we are writing, we need to have sound statistics. That is where your publication in a lower impact factor journal or in ophthalmology or retina, the difference is in sound methodology and stats. So if you see, all of my top cited papers have been written during my senior residency or fellowship. So this is the time when you really start building your career as well. Innovations. In senior residency, in junior residency, it's more of you are in a rut of working up patients, doing the groundwork. In senior residency, you have time to think. So a lot of our innovations, mine came during senior residency. One was devising the on-table scale for OCT. The older IOCT microscopes did not have a scale. So we came up with the innovation of measuring based on the depth of acquisition. We talked with the Zeiss engineers. In fact, the newer versions of Artivo, for those who have access to it, have a 1000 micron scale on the side. That was after discussions with us. So you can innovate as well and make a difference. We also innovated a surrogate scleral rim so that tissues do not go waste for lamellar keratoplasty. And I published 2 books, one in senior residency itself, and one the genesis of which was laid in senior residency. So it's a good time to build the foundations. Attend international and national conferences. They help you in exposure. As Dr. Karan rightly said, they help you in networking. So present your work. It will help you build up confidence. So I had my first instruction course in academy during my senior residency. And you can have travel grants from ICMR, DST. They do prefer less than 35 years students. So that is one plus point. And you can win awards as well. Don't forget to have fun while you're attending conferences. Go out for dinners and lunches with friends. Learn new skills. Never say never. The art of video editing, surgical movies, etc. Organizing workshops, conferences. A lot of work which is apart from the normal. You can do in your senior residency or fellowship, and it will help you in the long run. So a senior resident or a fellow is at a very unique vantage point. So when you are a postgraduate, you are typically a student. You are there to learn. When you are a faculty, you are more of a teacher. So in senior residency, you are in between. You are both a student and a teacher. So you have the umbrella of clinical supervision with freedom and opportunity to teach and train juniors. It's a privilege. Make the most of it. Mentors. If you cannot see where you're going, ask someone who has been there before. So I have been lucky and blessed to have a wonderful mentor. So whenever you are a student, you have a perception. You're more idealistic that someone will teach you these steps. Or someone will tell you how to do the surgery, handhold you. That's not true of real life. So sometimes just watching a genius at work gives you a lot of insights and inputs that you can inculcate. It can be long distance. You can have the privilege of directly working with them. But inculcate and imbibe because you have a basic skill set and you can build on it. So push your boundaries, step outside your comfort zone and strive to grow. Leadership begins when you step outside your comfort zone. Do not forget to live your life and create a new life. So I had my baby when I was a senior resident, so that will go hand in hand. There is no right time. There is no ideal time. It is now. Everything is just now. There is no tomorrow and there is no yesterday. So a apart from everything, build a career, but also build relationships that will last you a lifetime. This happens during senior residency or fellowship. Of course, it happens throughout your life, but as you grow older, these ties are more difficult to form. They are not only your friends, your support system, but also they'll be a part of your professional network forever your life. So don't forget to build relationships that will last a lifetime. Thank you.
Wonderful session. So one thing I would like to add here is, before deciding on which fellowship or which senior residency you want to do, you have to do underground work or research on which specialty is in demand in the area you are planning to work. If you are planning to settle down in your place, which is a city, some specialties like retina and cornea and all are super saturated. So finally, you'll also end up doing just cataract or something like that. But some other specialties are in high demand like plasty and pediatric. So you consider that also when you are planning for a fellowship.
Of course, but I also have a slightly different perspective. I think if you love what you do and excel at it, there is always a space for you. So there is always space at the top. It is mediocrity where saturation there is. Okay.
Tanya. So next speaker is Dr. Tanya Jain. She'll be speaking on role of international fellowships.
Hello and good afternoon, everyone. I'm Dr. Tanya. I'm a retina and uveitis person working in Dr. Shroff's Charity Eye Hospital in New Delhi. And you might be wondering, why am I talking about an international fellowship? That is because I had the opportunity to work at Stanford University in California, USA. So these are some pictures from there. We all know that it is one of the biggest and the center of innovation. It is at the hub of the startup universe. It's at the Silicon Valley, right where Facebook, Apple, etc. So I went there for a uveitis fellowship, and this is me at the Stanford campus, and you can see the beautiful campus with the palm trees in California. And I went to work under Dr. Kwan. He is a world-renowned uveitis specialist who is also one of the founders of AAO and AAO case reports. So I worked with him. And I'm here to talk about how did I get here and how did I decide to pursue this in my career. So I'll be talking mainly about these things. So first is, why should one do an international fellowship? Then second is how to find a niche, how to approach the mentor on the institute that you want to go in. Is there actually any role of doing ICO or FRCS? How to get a scholarship, because you know that California is maybe one of the most expensive places in USA also. What to expect when you get there and what to expect when you get back. So broadly, either you go there to learn and come back and work in your country, or you go there to settle and work there. So if you want to go there to settle, then that is a completely different talk. So today I'll be talking about how we learn there and come back. So first is, why do we want to go there? Everybody can have their different reasons. So these are few of the reasons that I came across. One would be like to know the latest medical trends, what's going on in the Western world. Second could be to learn from an expert, to get exposure, to get a degree or diploma, to maybe amp up your CV, to get into some clinical trials. Then I met a lot of people from Korea actually who had come there because they wanted their kids to speak good English. So that is also one of the things, to get into hardcore research at molecular level, and that could also actually be a path for you to settling down there. And well, there could be some who would just like to go there to travel. So for me, it was mainly to learn from an expert and to get the exposure of what was happening right there. But what I would say is, how did I go into uveitis and how did I think? one should always ask and self-actualize that what do we want to actually do in life and what really interests us and motivates us, that when we wake up every day, we don't feel like, we're going to work. We feel like, wow, we're going to work, and, we're excited about it. So it is very, very important to find a niche that you want to work in. That would really solve like 99% of your problems. So like I knew that I wanted to be, I wanted to pursue uveitis. So I knew that there were few uveitis specialists who are doing, cutting edge work, and I approached them. So for someone who's, doing retina, they know that, they're very much interested in uveitis, in maybe ROP, or maybe someone who's doing plasty is very interested, in oncology. So which institutes are good and which mentors to approach. So how I did it was that honestly, you will not believe it, I just wrote an email. I didn't do anything else. And I told him that I'm interested. I sent him my CV, and he conducted an interview with me on Zoom, and he called me over with a J1 visa. So even though I had done ICO while I was doing my residency, there are definitely certain pros with it, but when I applied for the ICO thing, they never really replied back to me. And it's a very slow process and very inconsistent replies. So I did definitely need a scholarship. There were there are a lot of options available actually right now. But what really worked out for me was IOFF. So IOFF is International Ophthalmology Foundation Fund. It is basically a European organization. They offer 3 types of fellowships. One is a 3-month one where you get like around $6,000, which supports your travel and living expenses. Then one is a year-long one where you get around $24,000 or $30,000. And another one is another 1-year one, but these are at very few institutes. So you can go to their website and see they offer a wide variety of institutes, like including Stanford, Carol Shields, and so you can actually search for your area of interest and just go and apply. So they see your CV and then they tell you that fine, we've accepted you, and then you can go and actually look for a host institute and apply there. So this is like the network of the fellowship institutes that you can see. And you can just mail, even if you have any doubt, you can just mail at this email ID, cgo@ioff. So this person is Cordula. I met her when at San Francisco during AAO. She's a very nice, warm person. And this is definitely one of the paths that you could take. Then what to expect when you get there? Accommodation, you can ask, we all have relatives or there are websites. Would suggest to be nearby to your hospital, because driving there is definitely one thing that everybody needs. I mean, a driver's license is not accepted in every country, and the public transport is really, really bad there. So it's good if it's nearby, walking or cycling. And food, I think it's a globalized world. I absolutely had no problem with food. So academically, my days were divided into clinics, research, and clinical trials. So they had 2 or 3 days of clinics where you could go and see the patients. So most of the fellowships, at least in USA, I know are non-surgical ones. But there are other countries, some fellowships like in Canada and UK, they do offer surgical ones also. But we would just sit in the clinic. We would be assigned patients. We would see the patients, talk to them, write everything, and then present it to the professor. Then research. There was definitely lots and lots of research, and they even had symposiums where they were doing all kinds of work with AI. And like a very, very interesting thing that I came across was that they were printing 3D glasses for patients with facial dysmorphism. Like they could not have normal glasses on them, so they were printing some 3D glasses which were customized to their face. And also, the most important thing and the thing that I would cherish is meeting people from all across the world. So you can see here, so Dr. Kuan had a large team where he had fellows like me, but there were fellows from all over the world. There was one from Egypt, from Singapore, from Canada, from Nepal, and Iran, Philippines. So I met people from ophthalmologists. They were all trained retina or cataract surgeons who were interested in uveitis. So there was a lot of exchange of ideas, and so that was something that really interested me. So this is us working at the clinic. Then one thing that I did not personally have an exposure here was how do actually clinical trials work. So this person was involved in very, very big clinical trials like View, Vista and all. And now I had the opportunity of working in trials like Leopard, Neptune. And so if you actually hear about these trials someday, and they are all, in process, recruiting patients. I was basically involved in different steps in different trials. In some trials, I was seeing the patients. In some, I was writing the protocol. In some, I was, writing the manuscript. So I had an exposure of working with different trials. And this is one of my patients who was given ACTH hormone for his scleritis. So this is actually a $26,000 drug or something which they are giving in trials with very, very good results, by the way. But what to expect? When you come back, definitely there are limitations. Mainly because for them everything is paid by insurance, and our patients, they even for FFA you have to think twice actually. But if you have the passion and if you actually convince the patient that you know what you're talking about, you can convince them. And there are so I have the pleasure of working with Dr. Sangwan at Shroff's Hospital, and he actually made me connect with certain NGOs who are willing to pay for the immunological, for the biologic drugs, which are very expensive for patients to pay otherwise. So you can definitely find a way. That thing is, you have to take that step first and, go out there and get to know what else can you do for your patient. So it changed a lot of things for me, but that's all. I think I've exceeded my time. So any questions, you can just email me or contact me. Thank you. Yeah.
So apart from the ICU, is there any other degree which you need?
No. So this was not because I had the ICU degree. Yeah, it didn't matter.
What questions were you asked in the interview?
He just asked me general questions like, what do you do? What kind of surgeries do you do? Why are you interested in uveitis? And stuff like that. Nothing very hi-fi, yeah. No, I had completed my retina fellowship and I was working as a consultant, and I took, so this was for 6 months, so I took a sabbatical and I went there, yeah.
Doesn't look like a sabbatical, I guess.
So before you come here, you can come for get your presentation ready. Meanwhile, ऐसा तो हो नहीं सकता कि तुम्हें आलू पराठे बिस्किट
सर मिलते हैं वहाँ पे आलू पराठे?
फ्रोजन मिलते हैं।
नहीं, फ्रेश सर। जो सिलिकॉन वैली है वहाँ पे सारा टेक हब है, वहाँ पे सबसे ज़्यादा इंडियंस है सर। हाँ no, you get everything. Yeah. This IOFF is actually funded by iFoundation. Yeah. So that's why you just have to ask. Those people are so approachable, you would not believe it. Just ask whatever you're interested in. Yeah.
And you can take them. Okay, move on to the next.
So, very good afternoon, everyone. So, what do you see on the screen? This is a happy and a sad emoji. How do I change the slides? Okay. Yeah, can I start? Yes. So what you see on the screen, this is a happy and a sad emoji. You connect with it. This is life in training, life as a doctor, life in general, right? And sometimes you're happy, sometimes you're sad, and things in between. So hello everyone, I'm Dr. Noopur, and I shall be talking on something different, the art of letting go. So here, I'm not here to give any gyan, okay? But yes, there are certain disclaimers. A lot of this is based on personal experience, my own beliefs. This may not apply to all. So take whatever, I'm saying with a pinch of salt. See what suits you. And everyone has their own shoes to walk. So there has to be no judgment, okay? So pressures, a lot of pressures in life. Personal, financial, professional, surgical, so much pressure. So they say diamonds are made under pressure. That's true, but not always. Sometimes pressures can crush you. So to avoid crushing, you sometimes have to let go. Let go, let's simplify this. The first thing, live in the present. So it's very famous dialogue. So this was actually suggested to me by my good friend Dr. Aarti Heda to put this slide up. So Deepika Padukone, she throws out, if you've seen the movie Ye Jawani Hai Diwani, she throws out Ranbir Kapoor's list of things that he has to do. So she says, how much ever you try, kuch to chhutega hi. Live in the present. That's right, Have a list. Have a list. But if you're not able to complete it, it's okay. Let it go. It's okay, You don't have to complete everything there. And try to enjoy the moment and try to live in the present. End the comparison, most important. If you continuously compete with others, you become bitter. But if you continuously compete with yourself, you become better. Isn't it true? For most of us, wherever, be it personal, professional, I work in an institute with more than 20 consultants. It's easier said than done. There's a comparison every day. Oh my God, she's doing 20 surgeries. I'm able to do only 15. But no, that is not the way to go, okay? Last month I did 15, I'm able to do 20. And what is my outcome? So you have to be your own competition. You have to compare it with yourself. Similarly for your personal things, you have to compare, you have to be your own comparison. You have to try to be a better version of yourself each day. Next, this very, very important time rule, 5x5 rule. If it won't matter in 5 years, don't spend more than 5 minutes worrying about it. There are so many instances, where you think, why did this happen, or what should I do? But just if it's worrying you too much, just take a step back and think, is this really going to matter after 5 years? If it's not, then just forget. It's not worth your time and attention. The guilt trip. When we let go, we're not able to do anything. We have this guilt. Oh my God, why? So try to live in such a way that guilt and regret have no reason or power to haunt you. It is said, guilt is one of those emotions that feeds on itself. With every bite, it gets a little heavier. So this comes, whatever decision you take, be confident about it. So very, very, inspiring quote by Ratan Tata. I don't believe in taking right decisions. I take decisions and then make them right. So very important. Next, overthinking. So this is a recent Facebook, share I came across. So I think the biggest challenge is overthinking, and especially what others will think about me. Overthinking is what kills you. The weight of thoughts, sculpture, so you can see it's stop thinking too much and stop thinking what others will think about you. Be confident in yourself. And the last important exclamation mark, the most important thing, let go, but don't give up. So the famous quote from Bhagavad Gita by Krishna, believe in yourself, do your karma, keep following your actions, but don't expect the results. That is where, this is the whole crux of letting go. Keep putting in efforts, don't expect, what things you cannot control, you can control your efforts, but you cannot control the results and the outcome. So you have to let go of that. Okay, so I just, when I was on the way to Kolkata, I just framed this very, very quick poem on the way. So I'll just read it out for you. This is a self-composed poem. Let it go. Dear young ophthalmologist, you have immense potential. You have immense energy. You wish and should accomplish things with a great zeal. You'll accomplish most, some you may not. Don't be disheartened if you miss the dot. But you need to move on and let it go. It's okay, better things await, and that you need to know. Nothing is impossible, because the word itself says, I am possible. Dream big, dream high. It's okay though to rest in a while and not fly. When things don't go your way, and when everything appears to be nay, you need to move on and let it go. Destiny has bigger plans, you need to know. So this is Dr. Nupur Goyal signing off. I call myself a dancing mom eye surgeon. So these are my pictures. The pictures are very evident. I have let go a lot of things in my life, but I have never given up, and I will never give up. So that's my message to you. Thank you so much.
Reality, like when you are actually in your OPDs, as a resident or a fellow or as an early beginner as a consultant. So there are days where you actually feel very low about it. So that is what she was talking about. There are other things in life which are much bigger than that at that particular moment. So if you can live past that moment and you take some positives out of it, you will have a better perspective to it. So this is what I would want to add.
I think, Nupur's energy was very vibrant, and I think it deserves another applause, right? So you should have this energy. Where's the Josh? आवाज नहीं आ रही. Where's the Josh?
Next we have Dr. Lipi Mittal, who will be talking on online resources, references at fingertips.
So good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Yossi, for having me in this session. I will be speaking about online resources in ophthalmology. There are various platforms and formats through which you can access these resources. I will be speaking about each one of them. Starting with American Academy of Ophthalmology, there is a specific corner for residents over here. You can browse through this corner and have access to all the videos, images, and audios by experts. They have resident lectures as well and basic skills video as well, where they have short videos which provide some of the keynote information and bite-sized information which are very helpful and must remember points during your clinics. iWiki is like Wikipedia specific to ophthalmology, which has been written and designed by eye physicians and surgeons, and there are subspecialty wise sections. You can just browse and search for the content you want information on, and you can get all the relevant information. And the interesting part here is that you yourself can edit and update on any article. One Network is another subdomain by American Academy of Ophthalmology, and if you're a member of AIOS, you can get access to one domain totally free. Speaking of AIOS, which has been guiding us through years, it has plethora of content, right from publications, guidelines, various fellowship programs, short-term and long-term, running across the country. eOphtha is a website where you can get PowerPoint presentations which will be helpful during your preparations, last-minute examination preparations, and some of the interesting blogs written by ophthalmologists. This design was my particular favorite during residency, designed by Dr. Timothy Root, where they have animated videos which will expand your concepts in ophthalmology. And this particular video on retinoscopy was my favorite and really helped me during my residency. iLearn is a guide for ophthalmology, which is a comprehensive guide, and it has all the contents like DOS time compilation, DNB question bank, self-curated iLearn notes by Dr. Krati Gupta and Dr. Saurabh Deshmukh sir, and all relevant information about various exams.
So there are various YouTube resources. I will be speaking about some of the most subscribed channels. Dr. Pratyush Ranjan sir, cataract coach run by Dr. Uday Devgan sir. He actually critiques and comments on residents' videos which are helpful in learning. You can learn by some other surgeons' mistakes. Dr. Deepak Megur sir has beautifully described each and every step of cataract surgery. Dr. Saurabh Patwardhan sir's Phaco tips. ASG Academy has international and national faculty lectures. OroTube by Arvind Eye Hospital has all the comprehensive surgical videos and especially SICS videos if you are a beginner in ophthalmology. Shankara Eye Academy of Vision was my favorite during residency as they have all the case reports. VioTube Yossi channel which has short videos about various ocular pathologies. iTube is specific for ophthalmology. It has various subspecialty wise content. iFocus online program. Vio slides are peer reviewed slides which will be helpful for residents and fellows during last minute preparations. So whenever you're not in a mood to read or watch any video or whenever you're traveling, you can simply listen to podcast. Eyes for Ears is an excellent initiative taken by some of the US residents. So there is a group of actually 4 or 5 residents sitting together discussing about some of the ocular pathologies and various recent updates. Snippets is a podcast initiated by Shankara Netralaya. Straight from the Cutter's Mouth is a retina podcast, and you can avail these podcasts on Spotify, Apple and Google Podcast as well. So for all the smartphone addicted people, there are various applications like My Eye Anatomy which will guide you through the eye anatomy, very important for beginners. It has a 360-degree eye model which you can rotate and learn anatomy from. Cataract surgery is not 100% accurate, but for beginners it is very good in learning rexes and phaco steps. Octavia is Retinal OCT Visual Atlas. Eye Grader designed by Dr. John Davis has all the gradings and classifications. Right now this application is available on Android only. So why not gain knowledge while scrolling down Instagram? Ophthalmobytes is an excellent Instagram handle designed by Dr. Shashwanti Mohan ma'am, where they have bite-sized information about some of the most important points to remember in diseases in ophthalmology. Cataract and refractive surgery is a newspaper or a journal kind of a thing where you can get all the recent updates about cataract, refractive surgeries, various IOLs and various refractive surgical platforms. Vio Flash Notes, Eye Doctor Ophthalmology has certain mnemonics which will help you to mug up or retain various syndromes which are asked during your viva. Then Ophthalmer and Dr. Manas Nath's channel also has excellent slit lamp and retinal images. So for residents or fellows preparing for international exams, Professor Chua and Professor P. Muthuswamy, they have actually virtual university and all the relevant information that will help you ace these exams. So there are certain platforms where you can get access to ebooks totally free like Z Library, Anna's Archive and Sci-Hub, but the legal status of these sites is still debatable. Grammarly is a AI-based tool where you can check for the spellings, grammars and language, and Zotero is for reference management. So there are endless resources out there. You just have to choose whatever suits best for you. Thank you.
All of them? Have you read all of them? All of them have you gone through?
Yeah.
सारे देख लिए हैं?
Not just right now, through my residency fellowship, yes.
I'm just joking. Excellent presentation. There's so much material available nowadays. I'm sure the previous generation did not have such opportunities as we have nowadays. Just a correction I have. VioTube, which is Yossi's official YouTube channel, doesn't just have short videos. It has webinars, it has emergency content, it has long surgical videos, journal clubs.
Yes.
It has everything that Yossi does. Some very, very short videos are there also. So please take a look at that. One I would say is go to King's Crux. King's Crux is by Dr. Pranesh Balasubramanian. It is a beautiful channel that he has, and his way of teaching also on some Facebook or whatever those videos pop out are very, very amazing that you can actually make that, copy it and put it in a presentation. Yeah, so any other comments from anybody?
to add, I think with time, like when you are a resident, you have a very different approach of looking into things. And as you grow into a consultant, I think what has been added on to is, which she has rightly pointed out, is podcasts. So for me, it's like instead of going back to basics or maybe getting updated on a lot of newer treatment modalities or what is happening with newer disease, most of those, even the bigger journals are available on Spotify, and even Instagram has good amount of these international journals where they publish and they report. So please do check in whatever journals you do. You can look on Instagram, podcast, Spotify, and those are of great help. As far as the other things, I think Dr. Lippy just was very good to start with. There was no running around the bush. He went with, I think, very nice groundwork on the content which she presented. Thank you.
So next speaker is Dr. Neeraj Shah, and he'll be speaking on Beyond Ophthalmology, the world out there.
So, good afternoon, everyone. All the speakers before me were very convincing and engaging, and the topics also are quite interesting. So, I am going to ask you to chuck ophthalmology and think beyond that as well. The picture that you see in the background is actually a picture that was shot by me in a very, very early morning flight just around sunrise. So I was just lucky enough to, open my eyes and I just saw that I could click this picture. So, before we start, please all of you all get your pen and paper out. This is going to be an exercise. Chalega, kuch bhi, anything that you could write on. So there are the usual attributes. All of you all are children to someone, of course. You may be a sibling, you may be a spouse, you may be a parent, and you are, of course, a professional ophthalmologist. Within the ophthalmology sphere, you all might be founder, director, whatever, or, junior consultants, whatever. Apart from that, who are you? So can you convincingly describe an attribute to yourself in a single word? Like, for example, I know Dr. Rakhi here is an excellent dancer. So what would people, or what would you describe yourself as, apart from the common attributes? Write it down for yourself, don't tell me. It's a secret for you. So the point being that you need to start thinking about yourself beyond these usual common aspects, and that's where we will talk about. So I'm just like what has been going on through millennia, I'm also going to share some commandments, write them down. Networking. So a lot has been said on networking, and networking definitely is very important. What do you mean by networking? So obviously there's no specific definition. It all depends on the objective of what you want to do, and it also depends on the kind of people that you are aiming to network with. For example, networking at an AIOC, your target audience is basically the fellow ophthalmologist, and your aim is to get noticed and perhaps job opportunities, research opportunities, and something like that. So that is what would networking be here. But when we talk, what I also mean by networking is when you should also learn to network outside your ophthalmology community. I'll give you one very interesting anecdote. So let us call this person Dr. K. So this Dr. K had once gone to Germany, and while coming back, a lot of every possible disaster that could happen. Luggage got, lost somewhere, passport messed up, wrong flight, wrong timing, everything. So basically the person was stranded in Germany. Now he had a really, really vast network of people beyond ophthalmology. So he could call up a lot of people, get a lot of stuff done, and subsequently, at least in a matter of 12 hours, with all his things intact, he could fly out of Germany back to India. So that is what is network, which can help you in times of immense crisis. another exercise. List out at least 5 people who are not your school friends, college friends, work friends, family or relatives, but who you can call upon in times of crisis. Likho. That is exactly what networking means, because these are your default acquaintances, so as to say. But have you all made any new acquaintances? And have you all made acquaintances in a new who are completely outside your line of work? Are they probably, they could be in F&B industry, they could be in engineering, they could be in whatever, automobile industry or whatever, So can you list out, how many of you all can list at least 3 people? Great. So, no, that's what. Within Ofthal they might count, but yeah. But more important is, see, it's very easy to network within ophthalmology. As of here, all the people here know probably 5 people already. So that would not really count. That is a different kind of networking. You first really need to understand. I'll come to that. So when we talk about networking, so yeah, don't worry. Even when I did this exercise for the first time, I was very depressed. I could write down only 4 people. I was asked to write a list of 10 people. Okay, I went home, I spoke to my wife. I was like, "Arey yaar, I could not write complete the list and all that." So my wife says, "Okay, don't worry, chill, doesn't matter. We know Dr. K. Dr. K has a huge network. So if you don't have a list, at least find out your Dr. K who has a huge network." So this was originally, I had written networking for dummies, but then I thought I'll be, polite and write networking for introverts. So when we are talking about networking, you really need to understand what is the goal. Suppose you go to a random social event, outside ophthalmology, by default consider that. So what you should have some idea of what kind of people you are going to meet. And you should have some idea, you should do some homework in the sense, what would you probably talk to them? The easiest thing to say would be, if you really don't know what to talk, would be just simply go and ask them about their work, what they do. And the conversation just starts proceeding. And it has to be open-ended conversations, you just cannot ask how was the food. They might just say good or bad, that's it, there's nothing to talk beyond that. Okay, so there has to be an open-ended question. And if possible, bring a person who is better at networking than you, or possibly knows that group of people already. When you are interacting with people, try to take a genuine interest in what they are saying, because people do make out whether you are preoccupied or not. Then sometimes it does happen that if you are at an event and you've already said hello to like 10 people, you are already bored, then it's okay, you can just step out of the hall. Like yesterday there was this presidential dinner and I went and met so many people, hello. After a while I got bored, I just went outside to the lobby, saw that ITC hotel, came back inside, fresh round of hellos. So it happens, it's absolutely okay, you can get bored. And networking sometimes can be really boring, sometimes it's embarrassing. It's like a gamble. You lose some, you gain some. In the sense, what do I mean by lose some is sometimes you go and meet people, but it just doesn't stick. You may never develop that acquaintance, and sometimes you end up making a fool out of yourself, but that's absolutely okay. Dr. Nupur was saying, no, that don't take yourself seriously, it doesn't matter. Next point is finance. You need to understand finance, the basic of finance. This picture here, what I intend to say is, one man's rate of interest is another man's rate of return. Please really understand this concept. And this coin, two-faced coin, obviously is standing. This coin is standing on the floor of inflation. Okay, so you really need to understand. Can I take a few more minutes? No. So you really need to understand basics of finance. So before I talk about finance, can someone just tell me, suppose you've invested in a stock market, mutual fund, whatever, and at the end of 1 year, you get 10% gain or return. How much did you really get? Did you really get 10%? Does anyone have a different figure apart from 10%? So, exactly. Correct. So there are certain standard formulas, standard concepts that you really need to understand. Rate of real return. So the rate of real return is not exactly 10. 10, let's assume that 6% is the annual rate of inflation. So if you 10 minus, of course 10 minus 6 is 4, but it will not really come to 4. Your rate of real return will come to somewhere between 3.8, 3.7. So you really need to understand, especially don't be gullible. Bankers think you doctors are very wealthy people. They'll come, especially in February and March, asking you to invest in schemes. And they'll say at the age of 55, 65, when you're about to retire, we'll give you this much monthly amount. Now that is what is the trick. Don't look at that amount. That amount may be saying that they'll give you 10 lakhs every month. You know, when you are 55, that could possibly be 20 to 30 years down the line. But that is pointless. You really need to understand that what is the rate of return in terms of percentage. And if it comes anywhere around 5, 6, 7%, you are at a loss. That scheme is useless. So you really need to understand what should be your average rate of return that you should be targeting.
Dr. Neeraj, if you can sum it up, please.
Yeah.
We are overshooting.
So, like I was about to say, there are really a lot of things that you can do. The world beyond ophthalmology is far and wide. There are social groups that you could join. These are many things. There are hobbies you can have. These are my bookshelves. Gardening. Fiascos sometimes happen. I went for swimming, developed a cuff. I went for badminton, developed a frozen shoulder. I went for volleyball, broke my finger. So these kind of things happen. Sometimes you win as well. And this is a long talk some other day. Thank you. This is just a small trailer of what you could possibly do beyond ophthalmology. And I have tried not to tell you things that are common gyan on Instagram, but what that I am trying to do as well. Thank you.
I would want to call all the speakers on the stage. We can take a group photo and we can call it an off. Please.
10 seconds from you guys.